Back on the Bernie and Sid Show, heard everywhere in the 77 WABC app. We're coming at you live from the NJDiet.com studios, 17 stories above Madison Square Garden. And we're honored to have our next guest. She's currently a New York State Assemblywoman, and she ran for mayor against Bolshevik Bill de Blasio. You might remember, she wildly exceeded expectations, gave him a good run for his money. Sadly, she wasn't successful because the electorate is not very bright in New York City, apparently. Anyway, Nicole Malliotakis is running for the Congress against Max Rose right now, this guy out in Staten Island and Bay Ridge. And she's on the phone with us right now. Good morning, Nicole Malliotakis.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to have you back.
It is great to have you back, Nicole. And listen, your website, NicoleForNY.com, it really assists in understanding this new criminal justice reform law that goes into effect January 1st, because you list at NicoleForNY.com all of the offenses that require no cash bail, and it really is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's roughly 400 offenses. I put the most egregious on my website, NicoleForNY.com/bail. I have a petition as well, and I urge all New Yorkers to go on and sign it because it's about to take effect in a couple of weeks, and there's been a great effort since it's passed in April to try to stop it, or at least reform it, because there are significant issues with this law. As you mentioned, number one, first of all, in other states, when you get rid of bail, you actually look at someone's potential threat to the public. We don't do that in New York State under this law. So you got to consider someone's dangerousness. You have to consider their criminal history. There are other ways that we could have ensured people got their constitutionally right to a constitutionally protected right to speedy trial. But this law doesn't address that stuff. It just basically says that 90% of the arrested population will just be arrested and released back on the street. Some will just be given a ticket and continue to walk on their merry way. This is what this law does, and some egregious crimes, as you mentioned down the list.
Yeah, so
no, some are really bad. The under 11 assault and selling drugs by a school. Listen, we're going to talk to this audience, Nicole. This happens to be a very bright audience, funny enough, very bright. But let's talk to them as if they didn't know a whole bunch of stuff, okay? So the average person goes, I don't get it. Why would you want people who commit crimes, especially some of these serious crimes, back on the street? If you're Governor Cuomo or Bill de Blasio, how does that help our city? So they want to try to figure out what is the motivation behind something like this, which starts January 1st. If they asked you that, what would your answer be?
Well, first, I think it's important that people understand what crimes are actually protected under this. So we're talking about criminally negligent homicide. You mentioned basically all drug dealing, aside from very heavy drug trafficking. Stalking and strangulation. If you are someone who has an ex-partner who is now stalking you, trespasses on your property, assaults you, that person could be released within hours. And, aren't you afraid that person may now come back and potentially kill you?
Yes.
I mean, these are serious crimes that I don't think people should be taking lightly, and I don't think people understand what's actually in the law. And that's why I'm speaking with you today, because I want people to know that we're not considering a criminal history here. How many times have we read in the paper that a bad judge has released someone with 12 prior arrests back onto the street and something bad happens? It's happening all too often.
But why? Is it because they're worried about overcrowding the jails? In other words, what are they? How do they sell this to the people that this is a good thing?
Well, I think it's just very liberal views, at least with the judges. Some of these judges, we had an incident where someone went into a church and threatened to kill a nun. Judge in Brooklyn released without bail, and that was in that situation. You had someone who walked into a precinct in Brooklyn, tried to take an officer's gun to shoot him, and that person was released back onto the street by the same judge, by the way, in Brooklyn. And the issue is that people need to be aware when they vote that these are the consequences. When you vote for civil court, those judges then end up either on civil court or they get assigned to criminal court. And so you really need to take these elections seriously. Now, in this case, the mayor and the governor, they want to close Rikers Island. They're making an effort to release those who are arrested. But 90% of the population, including those serious crimes that I mentioned, without considering criminal history, without considering whether they pose a threat to the public is plain wrong, and I need people to go to my website, NicoleForNY.com/bail. Sign the petition because I'm going to be forwarding this to Governor Cuomo with another letter. So I really urge everyone to go on today and sign on.
Absolutely right. I mean, you mentioned a couple of the egregious crimes, and there are others, robbery, burglary, promoting a sexual performance by a child, failure to register as a sex offender, making a terroristic threat, no cash bail. So, you got to go to this website, NicoleForNY.com, and get the governor to put a moratorium on this or something. Is that what your goal is?
Yeah, we want to, look, it's supposed to take effect January 1st. We want to see at least a moratorium. If he's not going to call a special session, which seems unlikely, then at least let's hold off until we can go back to Albany and make corrections. And let me tell you this is not a Republican just saying this. We have our Democratic district attorney here on Staten Island who's very much opposed. We have the district attorney in Queens. We have district attorneys around the state who are Democrats but are being very reasonable when it comes to this law because it does go too far. Our Attorney General, Tish James, has said it is going to be an issue to implement this by January. The courts are concerned. The Daily News, which was one of the biggest proponents of bail reform, is now saying that this goes way too far. Unfortunately, I think we can get some changes, or at least the governor to hold on this, but we need people to continue to call the governor's office, call your state legislators. Privately, I've spoken to state legislators that voted for this, and even they are saying that this was bad. But let me tell you the process in Albany. This bill, the final language, was stuck into a budget bill that we voted for in April. And, it was March 31st. We literally got the bill at midnight, and the vote took place at 5 a.m. after debate. Nobody in the public got to see the language. Nobody in law enforcement. They weren't considering, the professionals who actually deal with law and order every single day. We debated this bill, but it was done in the middle of the night when there was no press there. Public wasn't there anymore. You guys were all sleeping, and we're in Albany debating this bill and trying to fight to stop it. And it's very unfortunate that something so drastic was voted in the middle of the night, stuck in the budget, as opposed to taking it up outside of the budget process with hearings. Look, we all agree people deserve their right to a speedy trial, but we could be doing this responsibly and with restrictions. And, first of all, we should be investing more resources in our court system so these hearings are heard quicker. People shouldn't be sitting in jail if they are accused and not proven guilty. But when you have someone with 12, 2 dozen, 3 dozen prior arrests, and you have these serious crimes, and they pose a threat to society, then we need to actually slow down here and take a better look, hold hearings. Let's be smart about this. And the problem with Albany is they don't do things the right way. They just jam it down our throats. They don't want to consider input from experts. They want to go the furthest. They want to be the far, left of the country. So instead of addressing the issue to get people their constitutionally right to a protected trial, they go all the way to the far left.
Yeah, listen, the fact of the matter is, and I'll say it sounds draconian, the governor's going to have blood on his hands, and the people who voted for this bill up in Albany, they're going to have blood on their hands. That's a fact. And if we don't get it turned around, it's going to be a public safety hazard like we've never seen in New York State before. That's just coming from me, Nicole Malliotakis. Now, I'm going to segue, if you don't mind, to Max Rose. Max Rose, of course, he's back. I think he's in Washington right now. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi yesterday, she announced that the Congress will vote on articles of impeachment. It's not bipartisan. There's no evidence. The polls show that the public is against impeachment, yet Congressman Max Rose, who said he wouldn't vote for impeachment, did vote for it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's just another thing that he's flip-flopping on. And as we're on the topic of bail reform, we should point out that on a candidate questionnaire last year, he wrote that he supported this governor's bail initiative, the very law that we're talking about here.
Really?
And he also said that he supported the closure of Rikers Island. It seems maybe he's going to backpedal on that as well. But those are the things that he had said that he supported, in lending a voice to allow these things to pass. I think that's very important for people to know. And the same thing with impeachment. He said he opposed impeachment as a candidate. Now, as a member of Congress, he's supporting it. He's siding with Nancy Pelosi. He's siding with the squad. He's voting over 90% of the time with them. And he's going after a president with no facts, no evidence. And then, speaking of being innocent until proven guilty, he actually said the words in New York Magazine that the president is innocent and he needs to prove it, which is basically the complete opposite of what he had suggested a year ago. Yeah. So, there's a lot going on here. I think that the bottom line is that Max Rose is not representing the views of this district. He's a Park Slope liberal, just like Bill de Blasio, moved to the district to run. He's out of touch with the community, and we want a member of Congress who's going to go to Washington, work with the president, pass an infrastructure package, secure our borders. He's not doing any of that. And it's very unfortunate because that's why we on Staten Island and Brooklyn supported President Trump by over 10%. He won this district by. And so I think it's very important that we flip the House in 2020, and that's why I'm running. I want to stop the spread of socialism. I want to be a counterbalance to AOC and Ilhan Omar and the Socialist Squad. I want to fight for my constituents to bring infrastructure funding here. A lot of major issues. The seawall project that's taking place on Staten Island runs the whole course of my assembly district, and I've been very involved in that since the beginning, including getting funding from the state, $151 million to fund that project. I want to see it being completed on time, on schedule, and we have so many federal assets in this district, and I will be focusing on that instead of this impeachment nonsense.
Make Staten Island great again. Nicole Malliotakis. Remember, folks.
What?
Go to Nicole for New York. NicoleForNY.com. NicoleForNY.com. Get a list of these unbelievably violent crimes that requires no cash bail as a result of this law that was passed up in Albany that Governor Cuomo signed into law, actually. So go to NicoleForNY.com. Get all the information. And, Nicole, we wish you all the best. Listen, we're behind you 100%.
Yeah, you have our endorsement, which is, of course, a blessing and a curse.
Well, thank you very much. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah.
Same to you. Thank you.